Hello, welcome to this introduction to the use of the SharpCloud tool for managing data subject access requests under GDPR. This tool represents data in a number of ways, the most common of which is in a two-dimensional graph. We see here a number of subject access requests which are in flight. This tool should be read from left to right, where pending is the starting place where a subject access request begins, and completed on the extreme right shows that the subject access request has been fully complied with. We've also produced a view where we have 4 team members, each of whom is processing their own subject access request. Now, this tool is cloud-based, which means that multiple people can use the tool at the same time, and they'll each see a live, real-time updated view of the data involved. So let's begin by creating a new subject access request. So we'll start by creating a new item, and for this item we want to capture the name of the person who is being tracked in this. Now we have an ID for this person, who is the requestor, and also the subject of the request. That person's name is Elizabeth Henderson. So typing in Elizabeth Henderson. And we'll provide an external ID, which is a sequential reference number, just so we can distinguish between them. As each subject access request comes in, the document will be filed in a separate folder, which will be stored on an encrypted file system and assigned a unique number. So we now have a new subject access request, but it's not yet assigned to any of the team members. So let's look at this request and decide what else we can provide. Well, we've been asked to please add a copy of the identification document. So we can do that directly by defining a new image, and we'll choose from our files. Verify that this is indeed what we want to use. And we select that image and mark that that's the image that we want to use. At this stage, we can also enter in some information from the data subject access request document itself. Normally this will be a copy and paste. This is a request for personal data. Now, we can now provide information in the details of which person will be assigned this particular request. So we have a number of fields that we can put in, and here we want to assign this to team member number 3. Now, once we've done that, the request is now automatically assigned to team member number 3 and will appear on the work stream for team member number 3 if we chose to show that. Here, for example, is team member number 2's requests. Now, as the request progresses, we can move it to different statuses. Before we can do that, we unlock this view, and this gives us the ability to change the data that's here. Now, in addition, we can also add comments at any point to the story as it proceeds. This is a comment about the status or progress of the request. And remember, this is a team facility, so you can have multiple people working on the same view or different views and adding their own comments to the different stages or requests. So we'll begin by looking at the next step, can we verify the identity of the person? And that is normally done with the identity document. That looks like a valid identity document. There may be other checks that we need to perform as well. So we'll drag this to the next column. Sorry, we won't drag this to the next column, because if we drag this to the next column, for example, if we go back to team number 2, they have a request from an Andy Richardson. However, this request doesn't have an identity document. So we'll drag this to this status, which changes its color, and that shows us that this particular request is being held until an identity document check is performed. Next, we have the question, is the request substantiated? Can we understand the request? Does it make sense? If that's the case, we'll continue to the next one. Is the request unfounded or excessive? This is one of the standard checks for a GDPR data subject access request. Next, is the request relating to data for which we are not the controller? Remember, we can only satisfy requests that relate to data that we control. Next, we look at the question of whether the data is being processed by us. And if all of these checks are passed, then we can take the request and bring it to the point where the receipt data processing has been verified. Now, at some stage, we could decide that team member 4 doesn't have enough work to do. So the supervisor can switch this request into team number 4's workstream. And one thing to note, everything that happens here is logged in an activity feed. So every step is auditable. So our data processing has been verified, and at this point we begin the process of acknowledging receipt by communicating with the requester. Once that communication is complete, we go to our next status, which means that receipt has been acknowledged. At this point, we're busy fulfilling the request, collecting the data that's required from various sources, and so on. Next, we need to look at the data that would be referred back to the requester and filter out any data subject personal data which is not relevant to the requestor. For example, sometimes information may come back that relates to the personal data of multiple persons. So that information has to be redacted before we can satisfy the request. When that's done, we can bring that to the next status, which is non-data subject data has been filtered. Now, if a request is taking an inordinately long period of time, and remember, under the new law, the data controller will have 30 days to process the request rather than the 40 days which are currently available under the Data Protection Act of 1998. However, GDPR permits us to extend by another 60 days if there are significant burdens in processing the request. So, if necessary, we do need to notify the person within 30 days that an extension will be required. Finally, there may be some other reasons for denying a request, but assuming that that is not the case and the data has been sent to the data subject, we can take our request and bring it to the request completed category. And that is the workflow for the processing of data subject access requests using SharpCloud to visualize the information. Thank you for watching.